Hello, everybody. It's Jerri Ward back for the next to the last segment of I Object, Justice Examine, and I hope that all of you enjoyed the interview that I had with Pastor Baldwin. That was a pre-recorded interview, and I know I sure learned a lot from him about what his campaign stands for, and I was quite proud and honored to be able to bring him to you today. I have been reading him for quite a while, and all of you can read his information at checkbaldwinlive.com. I also have his campaign website hyperlinked on his name on the Right Talk webpage, but he is a great candidate. He is a great man, and there are many topics that I wanted to get into with him that I was unable to get into because, of course, since he is a presidential candidate, he definitely has limited time now and cannot give extremely long interviews to anyone. But one thing that I did want to talk to him about was he is a pastor of a church, of Crossroads Baptist Church, and one thing that he has started that I think is very interesting is the Black Regiment of preachers. And if you go to his website, you can read the history on the Black Regiment, because during that period of time, our preachers, before they gave in to the government and started taking the tax breaks and the not-for-profit exemptions, which, of course, placed certain government restrictions on them about what could happen in the churches, we had very independent preachers. And at the beginning of the American War of Independence, there was a Black Regiment of preachers. And, of course, the Black Regiment stands for the fact that they wore black robes back then, or black suits. And they were very independent. They didn't bow to King George, but rather they talked to their parishioners about freedom and liberty. And they were instrumental to the War of Independence, our War of Independence from Great Britain. And they were a very instrumental part of our revolution. And now that I'm back on, I just heard word from my producer that Alana Mercer has joined us. And Alana is a guest on my twice-weekly show, a regular guest. And Alana,
hi,
are
Jerri.
You there?
Hi, Jerri. I am.
Great. Thanks for being back on the show. And I want to let everybody know a little bit about you in case they haven't listened to the show before. Alana is a U.S.-based classical liberal writer, and that does not mean leftist. She writes a popular weekly column, Return to Reason, that is published at worldnetdaily.com. She also is the author of a book, Broadside, One Woman's Clash with a Corrupt Culture. And Alana also has a blog called Barely a Blog, and you can find that, a link to that at her website, alanamercer.com. And one thing that I wanted to talk to Alana about is, Alana, you've been writing a lot about the Second Amendment the last few days.
Well, related topics. I don't write much about the Second Amendment because there's such fabulous people doing that, and there's no need for overlap. So yes, I thought that just in time for Independence Day, we had marvelous news about the gentleman in your neck of the woods, Joe Horn.
Oh yes,
yeah, and we might see. Hard cases like that turn into good law rather than bad law.
In case people don't know about Joe Horn is the neighbor of a family whose house was broken into by two illegals. And Joe Horn, despite the dispatcher from the police department telling him to hide in his house, went out and confronted them to save his neighbor's property and ended up shooting and killing both of them.
He did, and I was extremely curious to see to hear what you would have to say about that, because really, as the adage goes, hard cases don't make bad law, and this certainly was a hard case, as many detractors of this hero put it, he did shoot them outside, as they were making escaping, so to speak.
Right. Well, one of them, I think he shot in the back. And, the thing is that he was no billed by a grand jury. A grand jury refused to indict him. And if this had been the 1800s and this would happen, nobody would have raised an eyebrow about it because they were two thieves. They were getting away with property. And as everyone knew back then, property it can be your means of survival, and it's yours. And if somebody's going to come steal it, they risk their lives. And in the 1800s and early 1900s, nobody would have batted an eye. But we've had all this case law, and we've had the legislature come up with statute after statute where they've attempted to place limitations on the rights of property owners to protect their property
and that of their neighbors
with lethal force. And so I was a bit afraid of what a grand jury might do, but I quite frankly, I was pleased that they no-billed him.
Oh, absolutely. But in any other state, this would not have happened. And the only thing that we can say is possibly with Heller will come, relitigation of castle laws and maybe better law.
Well, I think state after state is strengthening, at least in the South, is strengthening the castle laws so that people do not have to retreat when somebody invades their house. But of course, I am not as pleased with Heller as you might think because I think it opened the door to many more regulations. It pretty much gave carte blanche, in my opinion, to states to place regulations upon the right to bear arms. And, quite frankly, even though I'm a lawyer, I don't believe in positivist law. I believe that the right to self-defense against both criminals and oppressive governments is a right that comes from God.
Absolutely, but did they entrench existing, registration and other inhibitions on ownership, or did they add more to that?
Well, it's very unfortunate that when oral argument occurred, one of the lawyers who was representing the side of the Second Amendment was asked whether or not he had any problem with licensing regulations, and he basically said he did not. And we already are seeing some case laws or some cases follow this. The Ninth Circuit just came out with a case called U.S. versus Gilbert, where they followed the Supreme Court's lead in okaying regulation. And I'm sorry, I work with bureaucracies every day, and I know how they aggrandize power.
Yeah, and they're going to pick up on the small minutiae, but there is the larger picture here. And in fact, Randy Barnett, one of the sharpest legal minds in the libertarian community, called Justice Scalia's reasoning one of the clearest, in as much as the interpretation of the original meaning of the Constitution goes. So we might want to look also at the recognition of natural rights here, that is historical.
Well, I will look at what he has to write, but I don't always agree with lawyers who claim that they're libertarians. So we'll just have to see. And Alana, I want you to stay over because I want to talk a little bit more about this, and also, if we have time, let everybody know what your column for tomorrow is. So
sure.
Everyone stay over, and Alana and I will be here.
Get a free Razor cell phone delivered free to your door.
Hello, it's Jerri Ward back with Alana Mercer. And Alana, you had a thought going there about the Heller case. What, you want to finish that thought before you had that going?
As I say, I haven't studied the case, but I haven't studied the decision. But I think that certainly we can look at the big picture and appreciate the fact that there has been a recognition of the right of self-defense as a natural right, which is in itself historic. You made the other point that the Brady Bunch is litigating based on Heller, and that certainly is an omen. I agree with you. But
one part that the Supreme Court left out is it's not only for self-defense against criminals, it's also self-defense against overreaching government, and we have a perfect example in the 20th century of that happening in Athens, Tennessee, in 1946, when veterans rose up against corrupt county government after that government beat up and threw out a poll watcher because they wanted to the government wanted to fix an election. The veterans in that town went home, got their guns, and they besieged the county courthouse, and they threw out a corrupt, oppressive government.
Marvelous.
And that was the Second Amendment in action. And the court totally ignored that part of the right.
Ignored or forbade. I mean, this is a beginning. Surely there will be further litigation and building on this decision.
Oh, well, there is further litigation. We've got the Ninth Circuit approving regulations in a recent case, approving more regulations of the right to bear arms, saying that people don't have a right to machine guns and things of that nature.
Well, and that's been going on all the time, hasn't it?
That's right.
Well,
citing the Heller case.
Look, as I say, I'm not an expert on the Second Amendment, but I do see a great deal of positive to come out of this, at least in the substance of the decision. The minutiae of it, around it, you're right, the bureaucracy is going to pick up on, as is always the case. But I think that you do have something positive here.
Well, yes, we should look at both sides, and there is something positive, but I also see something growing that's dangerous that we need to keep an eye on, and that we need to be prepared to fight at every turn because it ain't over yet. And neither is this show. We'll be back in 2 weeks for another I Object, Justice Examined.
See you in 2, Jerry.
Yes.
This is Right Talk Radio.